Amber glanced over at Frank, who was methodically eating a sandwich while reading a paperback novel that looked like it had been through a war zone itself. Pages yellowed, spine cracked, cover barely hanging on. Maybe he's just shy, Amber suggested, though she didn't believe it. There was nothing shy about Frank Doyle. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the world and decided most of it wasn't worth getting excited about. Shy? Honey, I've tried everything. Compliments, flirting, asking about his tattoo, even accidentally bumping into him when I serve his coffee. The man is immune. Amber had noticed the tattoo herself, an anchor, with rope wrapped around it on his left forearm, the kind of ink that spoke of military service. There were also scars on his hands, the kind that came from work, not accidents. Bet you $20 I can get him to smile before he leaves tonight, Amber said, surprising herself with the challenge. Chloe raised an eyebrow. You're on, but when you strike out, you're buying my drinks after work. And when I win, you're covering my last 2 tables so I can leave early. Deal. But Amber, I'm telling you, that man is made of granite. What would you do if you were a waitress trying to connect with a customer who seemed completely closed off? Would you respect their privacy? Or would you try to break through their walls? Let me know in the comments. Amber approached table 7 with more confidence than she felt. Frank looked up from his book, a well-worn copy of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, and nodded politely. How's everything tasting tonight, Mr. Doyle? Fine, thank you. She noticed the book's title and felt a small opening. Good book? It is. I read that in college. Heavy stuff. All those stories about Vietnam. Frank's eyes met hers for the first time in 8 months of serving him. There was something in that look, not hostility, but a kind of tired wariness, like he was used to people making assumptions. You served? She asked, gesturing to his tattoo. Navy. Long time ago. Amber leaned closer, lowering her voice to what she hoped was an appealing tone. Bet you have some stories. I always wondered what it was like back then. Young guys in uniform traveling the world. Must have been exciting. Frank set down his sandwich and looked at her with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see right through her performance. Ma'am, are you trying to flirt with me? The directness of the question caught Amber completely off guard. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. I was just making conversation. No, you weren't. You were trying to get a reaction. Your friend over there is watching, and you've got that look people get when they're working an angle. Amber's confidence evaporated. She had been caught, and Frank's calm observation made her feel foolish rather than charming. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's fine, but let me ask you something. Do you miss the times when men used to chase after you wherever you went? The question was so unexpected that Amber just stared at him. What? You're a pretty young woman. I imagine you've gotten used to having that kind of effect on people. Do you miss it when it doesn't work? Before I continue with Frank's response, I need to ask, how old are you? This story is about to reveal some harsh truths about the cost of military service, and I want to make sure you're prepared for the emotional weight of what comes next. Drop your age in the comments. Amber felt off balance, like she was in a conversation she hadn't prepared for. I don't understand what you're asking. Frank took a sip of his coffee and continued studying her face. I'm asking if you've ever considered that some people have reasons for not smiling, reasons that have nothing to do with you. I just thought, everyone likes to feel appreciated. I appreciate good service. You bring my food, you keep my coffee filled, you don't bother me with small talk. That's perfect service. But don't you get lonely, sitting here by yourself every week? Frank was quiet for a long moment, and Amber thought maybe she had finally found a way through his defenses. Miss Stevens, he said finally, using her name for the first time. Do you know why I come here every Friday at exactly the same time? No, sir. Because routine is how you honor the dead. Same table, same meal, same time. It's not about loneliness. It's about remembering. The word dead hit Amber like a physical blow. She had been treating this like a game, a challenge to her feminine wiles, and Frank was talking about death. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You assumed an old man sitting alone must be lonely, must want company, must want a pretty girl to brighten his day. Frank reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that he placed on the table next to his plate. It was a military challenge coin, old and worn, with the Navy anchor and eagle clearly visible despite years of handling. November 24th, 2003, Fallujah Province, Iraq. My unit was escorting a convoy when an IED took out our lead vehicle. 3 Marines died that day. I lived because I was in the second truck. Amber stared at the coin, feeling a growing sense of shame for her earlier behavior. This coin belonged to Corporal Danny Martinez, 22 years old, from Phoenix. He was going to marry his high school sweetheart when he got home. He carried this coin for luck. Frank turned the coin over, revealing rough scratches that spelled out 24.11, 3 for the 3. I come here every Friday because that's when Danny used to call his girl back home. Same time every week, no matter where we were deployed. I sit at the same table because routine was something we could count on when everything else was chaos. And I don't smile because there's nothing funny about outliving better men than me. What's the most powerful part of Frank's story to you? Is it the routine of remembrance or the weight of survivor's guilt? Share your thoughts in the comments. Amber felt tears stinging her eyes. Mr. Doyle, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. You don't need to apologize for not knowing. But maybe next time you might consider that when someone sits alone, they might have a good reason. Frank stood up, left his usual $20 bill on the table, and placed the challenge coin in his pocket. Have a good evening, Miss Stevens. As he walked toward the door, Amber felt like the worst person in the world. She had turned a man's grief into a bet, treated his solitude as a personal challenge, and completely missed the obvious signs that he was carrying burdens she couldn't begin to understand. Chloe approached the table as Amber stood there in shock. Well, did you get him to smile? Chloe, we need to talk. That night, Amber went home to her small apartment and couldn't stop thinking about Frank's words. She found herself Googling November 24, 2003 Fallujah and immediately wished she hadn't. The article was from the Stars and Stripes military newspaper. 3 Marines killed in IED attack. Lone survivor credits fallen comrades with saving his life. The photo showed a younger Frank Doyle, maybe 45 years old, his face streaked with dirt and blood, kneeling beside 3 flag-draped coffins. The caption identified the dead: Corporal Danny Martinez, 22, Phoenix, Arizona; Lance Corporal Michael Chen, 20, San Francisco, California; Private First Class James Washington, 19, Detroit, Michigan. The article described how Petty Officer First Class Frank Doyle had used his body to shield the 3 Marines from the secondary explosion, suffering severe injuries but saving their lives until medical evacuation could arrive. All 3 died from their wounds before reaching the field hospital. Doyle refuses to be called a hero, the article quoted. He says the real heroes are the ones who didn't make it home. Amber closed her laptop and sat in the dark, feeling sick about her behavior. She had spent 8 months seeing Frank as a challenge to her attractiveness, instead of recognizing him as a man carrying the weight of survivor's guilt and the memory of fallen friends. The next morning was Saturday, and Murphy's Tavern didn't open until 4 p.m., but Amber had a key because she sometimes came in early to prep for busy weekends. She let herself into the empty bar at 6:15 a.m. and went to work. At 6:30 a.m., Frank's usual time, even though the bar was closed, she heard his pickup truck pull into the parking lot. Through the window, she watched him sit in his truck for exactly 5 minutes before getting out and walking to the door. When Frank tried the handle and found it locked, he looked confused for the first time since Amber had known him. She opened the door. "Miss Stevens, the bar's not open." "I know, but you are. Please come in." Frank hesitated, then stepped inside. Amber led him to table 7, where she had set up something that made him stop in his tracks. 4 cups of coffee sat on the table. 3 were positioned around an empty chair, and 1 was at his usual spot. Next to the 3 cups, she had placed a grilled ham sandwich cut into 3 pieces. "I looked up that date. she said quietly. "I read about Danny, Michael, and James. I read about what you did." Frank stared at the table setup, his jaw working silently. "I don't know the right way to honor fallen soldiers," Amber continued, "but I thought maybe this is for you. This is for the ones you remember. And this is so I don't feel like such a terrible person for treating your grief like entertainment." What's the most important lesson Amber learned about making assumptions about people? How should we approach strangers who seem closed off or distant? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Frank stood very still for a long moment, looking at the 4 cups of coffee and the 3 pieces of sandwich. When he finally looked up at Amber, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. I've been an idiot for 8 months. Frank pulled out his chair and sat down at table 7. For the first time since Amber had known him, he seemed to relax, his shoulders dropping slightly. "Danny would have loved this," he said quietly. "He was always trying to get people to sit down and have coffee with him. Said it was the most important meal of the day." "What was he like?" "Funny. Always cracking jokes, even when things got bad. He had this laugh that could make you forget where you were for a minute." Frank picked up one of the extra coffee cups. "Michael was the smart one. 19 years old, and he knew more about military history than our lieutenant. Could tell you about every battle ever fought." He gestured to the 3rd cup. "And James. James was the baby of the group. 18 when he deployed, 19 when he died. He used to show everyone pictures of his little sister back home. Said he was going to buy her a car when he got back." Amber sat down across from Frank, something she had never done before. "Do you come to the bar because it reminds you of them?" "I come because routine is how you keep promises to the dead. I promised Danny I'd have coffee every Friday at the time he used to call his girl. I promised Michael I'd keep reading. He was always telling people to educate themselves. And I promised James I'd remember what it felt like to be 19 and think you're going to live forever." Frank smiled for the first time since Amber had known him, not a big smile, but a real one. "You know what, Miss Stevens? This is the first time in 20 years that I've had coffee with someone on a Friday who understood why I was drinking it." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Frank reached into his jacket and pulled out the challenge coin again. "Danny gave this to me the night before the convoy. Said it was for luck. I've been carrying it ever since, but I think maybe it's time to pass it on." He placed the coin on the table between them. "I can't take that," Amber said. "It's yours." No, it was Danny's. And Danny believed in second chances. He believed in people learning from their mistakes and doing better. Frank pushed the coin toward her. "You did something today that most people never do. You recognized when you were wrong, and you did something to make it right." That's the kind of person Danny would have wanted to carry his coin. Amber picked up the worn challenge coin, feeling the weight of its history and significance. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Remember, when you see someone sitting alone, remember that they might have reasons. When you're tempted to judge someone for being different or distant, remember that everyone carries invisible burdens. And when you have the chance to show kindness instead of seeking entertainment, remember 3 young men who died too far from home." What's the most powerful thing about Frank's decision to pass on Danny's coin? What does it mean to honor the memory of people we've never met? Leave your final thoughts in the comments. 6 months later, Amber still worked at Murphy's Tavern, but everything had changed. She no longer saw customers as challenges or entertainment. She saw them as people with stories, burdens, and reasons for being exactly who they were. Frank still came in every Friday at 6:30, but now their routine was different. Amber would bring his coffee and sandwich, and they would sit together for a few minutes while he told her stories about Danny, Michael, and James. Not war stories about who they were as people. Danny once spent his entire leave helping his neighbor rebuild a fence, Frank told her one Friday. Didn't even know the guy well. Just saw he was struggling and decided to help. Michael wrote letters home for guys who couldn't write well themselves. Never made them feel stupid about it. Just helped them say what they wanted to say to their families. And James used to send half his pay home to his mom to help with his sister's school expenses. Never told anyone about it. We only found out after he died. Amber kept Danny's challenge coin in her pocket every day, and it changed how she approached her job. When she served the trucker who was always grumpy, she remembered that he might be worried about his family. When she dealt with a construction worker who drank too much on Fridays, she remembered that he might be carrying pain she couldn't see. The coin reminded her that everyone deserved dignity, respect, and the benefit of the doubt. One Friday evening, a young soldier in uniform came into Murphy's Tavern and sat alone at a corner table. Amber watched him for a moment, maybe 21 years old, staring into his beer with the weight of the world on his shoulders. She approached his table with coffee and a kind smile. "Everything okay tonight?" He looked up with tired eyes. "Just thinking about some friends who won't be coming home." Amber pulled Danny's challenge coin from her pocket and set it gently on the table. "A wise man once told me that routine is how you honor the dead, and the best way to honor fallen friends is to remember their stories, not just their sacrifice." The young soldier stared at the coin, recognizing it immediately as something sacred. "This belonged to someone special," Amber continued. "And he taught me that everyone carries invisible burdens, everyone deserves respect, and kindness is always the right choice." She left the soldier with the coin and walked back to the kitchen, where Frank was waiting with his usual Friday smile. "I saw what you did," he said. "Danny's coin found the right person." "You found the right person. There's a difference." As Amber wiped down table 7 for the last time that evening, she thought about the chain of kindness that had started with 3 young Marines, continued through an old Navy veteran carrying their memory, and now extended to a new soldier who needed to know he wasn't alone. The coin would continue to travel, carrying with it the lesson that true honor isn't found in grand gestures or public recognition. It's found in the quiet moments when we choose to see each other's humanity and respond with compassion instead of judgment. Frank Doyle still comes to Murphy's Tavern every Friday at 6:30 p.m. He still orders black coffee and a grilled ham sandwich. But now he's not alone. He's surrounded by the memory of friends who taught him about courage, the presence of a friend who learned about respect, and the knowledge that kindness can transform both the giver and the receiver. And somewhere out there, a young soldier carries a challenge coin that reminds him every day that the best way to honor the fallen is to live with dignity, treat others with respect, and never forget that everyone has a story worth hearing. Stevens wiped down the same table for the 3rd time, her eyes scanning the Friday evening crowd at Murphy's Tavern, a weathered dive bar that sat between 2 truck stops on Highway 17 in rural South Carolina. At 26, she had been working the dinner shift for 8 months, long enough to know every regular customer's order and personal drama, but still new enough to find entertainment in the predictable rhythms of small-town life. The Friday crowd was typical truckers grabbing dinner before the weekend, local construction workers celebrating the end of another hard week, and a handful of older men who seemed to treat the bar as their second living room. But there was one customer who stood apart from the rest, a man who intrigued Amber precisely because he seemed completely immune to her considerable charms. Frank Doyle sat alone at table 7 every Friday at exactly 6:30 p.m., ordered black coffee and a grilled ham sandwich, left a $20 bill for a $12 meal, and departed without saying more than "thank you" and "have a good evening." He was 68 years old. Amber had learned from his credit card, with silver hair, weathered hands, and pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. If this story draws you in already, please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. Stories about respect, redemption, and the hidden burdens of our veterans need to be shared, and your support helps us tell these important tales. "I'm telling you, Amber, that old man is like a statue," said Chloe, her fellow waitress, as they folded napkins during a brief lull. 3 months I've been trying to get him to smile, crack a joke, anything. Nothing. It's like he's made of stone." Amber,